You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. It's Tuesday. It's the day after Christmas. So is everybody still in their food coma? Maybe they're opening up too much presents coma. Maybe the, oh crap, I spent too much for Christmas coma. Yes, we have survived another holiday season. And now we've got to look forward to New Year's on the horizon in a few days. Hopefully most of you guys have survived it well. Hopefully you're all doing well and enjoying your time off for some and going back to work for others. And so what we're going to do here on Snarky Faith today is going to be a little different, or a lot of different than what we typically do. We published a couple of interesting things over the years, and this is one of our Christmas traditions, even though I understand this is the day after Christmas. So I am going to give you a dramatic reading of Lemony Snicket's The Latke Who Couldn't Stop Screaming, which is somewhat of an ecumenical Christmas story. And I know it's the day after Christmas, but I think you can handle it. I think you can handle that well. And on top of that, I want to give you some of our highlights of the year. So we're going to kind of give a little bit of the 2017 rundown, whether it be through interviews that we've had or interesting parts of the show. So without further ado, I'm going to give you the Latke Who Couldn't Stop Screaming, and you're going to get kind of the best of our year this last year. And before I even get to that, I just want to go ahead and thank you guys for being a part of this whole Snarky Faith thing that we're doing and saying, hey, we couldn't do this without you. So thank you so much. And here's the Latke Who Couldn't Stop Screaming. The Latke Who Couldn't Stop Screaming, A Christmas Story by Lemony Snicket. This story ends in someone's mouth, but it begins in a tiny village more or less covered in snow. The snow had fallen during the long night, during which the children had pressed their faces to the windows looking for a glimpse of a man who they suspected of bringing them wonderful gifts. But instead they heard a terrible noise from a certain cottage in the neighboring arrondissement, a word which here means a place where something was being born. This cottage was already regarded with some suspicion, as it was the only place not decorated with flashing colored lights this time of year. The thing that was being born was a latke, a word which means potato pancake. Latkes are a traditional part of the celebration of Hanukkah, a holiday commemorating a miraculous Jewish military victory. Nearly everything in this world is born screaming, and the latke was no exception. Except though, the latke wasn't conceived and born in the way that you and I are conceived and born, but instead was fashioned from grated potatoes, chopped onions, beaten eggs, and a dash or two of salt. Once these ingredients were properly mixed, the latke was slapped into a pan full of olive oil, heated to a very high temperature, and this is when it began to scream. The latke was suffering so much that it leapt out of the hot pan, out of the window of the cottage, and began to run screaming down the boulevard. This may seem like unusual behavior for a potato pancake, but this is a Christmas story in which things tend to happen that would never occur in real life. The latke ran past a row of flashing colored lights, which hung from the rain gutters of a less suspicious cottage.
What's all the ruckus?
The lights said in unison.
We're the ones who are supposed to be dominating the neighborhood with their cheerful glow.
I was just thrown into a pan of boiling oil,
The latke cried in reply.
Can you believe it?
Yes,
Said the flashing colored lights.
but we can't imagine why.
Because I'm a latke,
said the latke.
The olive oil reminds us of the oil we used to rededicate the temple following the defeat of Antiochus at the hands of the Maccabees. The oil was only supposed to last for 1 night, but there was a miracle, and it lasted for 8. Plus, frying makes my skin crispy and brown.
So you're basically hash browns?
Said the flashing colored lights.
Maybe you could be served alongside a Christmas ham.
I am not hash browns,
cried the latke.
I am something completely different. Ah! Ah!
The latke rounded the corner and found himself face to face with a candy cane, which wrinkled its red and white nose at the latke in distaste.
I'm trying to sprinkle the night air with my peppermint scent.
The candy cane said,
Your mouth-watering smell, not to mention all that yelping, is spoiling the effect.
My mouth-watering smell is part of the cozy feeling of Hanukkah.
The latke replied.
It reminds us that things are better now than they were in 175 BCE, when my people were not allowed to practice their religion. In order to study the Torah, they had to hide in caves. And when they heard the Greek soldiers approach, they pretended they were gambling with a small spinning top called a dreidel.
Sort of like Joseph and Mary hiding out in the manger,
said the candy cane.
Someone should write a Christmas carol about you.
I am not part of Christmas,
cried the latke.
It is a totally different thing. Ah! Ah!
The screams of the latke grew quieter and quieter as the pancake ran out of the village into the surrounding forest. Its utter fury was unabated, a phrase which here means the latke was still very annoyed at the objects whom he had spoken, but was quite tired, and now decided to rest for a few minutes beneath the branches of a little pine tree. The pine tree was napping, but woke up at the sound of an object plopping down at its feet.
Are you a present?
The pine tree asked.
Presents are pretty much the only thing allowed to sit beneath me during this time of year.
The latke sighed.
Presents aren't really a big part of Hanukkah,
it said in a voice hoarse from screaming.
There's nothing wrong with giving gifts to loved ones, of course, but it's more important to light candles for 8 consecutive nights to commemorate the miracle in the temple and the miracle victory even when you are thoroughly outnumbered. So you shouldn't give up hope. Plus Santa Claus,
said the pine tree. The latke was too exhausted to scream.
Santa Claus has nothing to do with it,
the latke said.
Christmas and Hanukkah are completely different things. But different things can often blend together,
said the pine tree.
Let me tell you a funny story about pagan rituals.
But before the pine tree could begin its story, a family came trooping through the snow, searching the forest carefully. We shouldn't have waited until the last minute to get ready for the holiday, said the father in the family, who was holding an axe. We'll never find a good one.
You shouldn't give up hope,
said the mother and pointed at the pine tree.
Look!
It's perfect,
said the daughter.
Beautiful,
agreed the son.
Such a marvelous shape,
said the mother. And its skin looks so crispy, said the father, and reached down and scooped up the little latke in the snow. We'll need to reheat it, of course, but this will be perfect for Hanukkah dinner, with a topping of applesauce, sour cream, and even jam.
I'll refry it in oil,
said the mother,
to remind us of the rededication of the temple.
And the triumph of the Maccabees over Antiochus,
added the daughter.
After hiding in the caves all that time,
the son chimed in. So the father smiled down at the latke in his mitten, and then stared curiously in his other hand. What was I thinking, bringing this axe? He said to himself. So the family strolled back into the village, walking past all the cottages with flashing colored lights, and smiling politely at all the candy canes until they reached their own home. The family carried their latke into their own home, which was warm and cozy, and sat down at the table, which was lit with the flickering candles of a menorah, or Hanukkah, which is a branched candelabra designed specifically for the holiday. It is very frustrating not to be understood in this world. If you say one thing and keep being told that you mean something else, it can make you want to scream. But somewhere in the world, there's a place for all of us. Whether you are an eccentric form of decoration, a peppermint-scented sweet, a source of timber, or even a potato pancake. On a cold, snowy night, everyone and everything should be welcome somewhere. And the latke was welcome into a home full of people who understood what a latke is and how it fits into its particular holiday. And they ate it. The end. Well, another fun moment we had this past year was being able to sit down and talk with Professor Carl Giberson. And Carl had written a dramatic reading of what it would sound like for Jesus to sit down with Donald Trump at Trump Tower. And after that interview, I had further correspondence and talked with Carl and said, hey, Carl, what would you think about us putting together a dramatic reading of what you had written? And his answer was, sure, great. I'd love to hear it. And if you missed that show, I'm going to let you guys hear it again right now. This is a dramatic reading of Jesus at Trump Tower by Carl Giberson.
One day, Jesus visited Donald Trump at Trump Tower. He had been invited because Donald wanted to ask him a question, and Jesus was curious. Trump usually answers questions since he has such a high IQ, and even has an uncle who was so smart that he taught engineering at MIT for 50 years.
You know, Jesus, I'm smart. Really smart. Probably the smartest person who was ever president. It's in my genes. I have great genes. But I want to tell you something big. I don't know everything, okay? I know you might not believe that, but it's true.
I believe you. In fact, I've known that for some time.
And you are smart too, I hear. Maybe as smart as me, who can say? But you're the Son of God and all, so I want to ask you a question.
What would you like to know?
I'm interested in eternal life, in heaven, okay? Now, I'm not worried that I won't go to heaven, of course. In fact, if you come to Trump Tower, you will see I practically live there now. And my latest wife is an angel, if you know what I mean. And we know angels don't grow old, just like my wife doesn't grow old, because I keep replacing her with a younger one, okay?
Jesus stared at Trump, struggling to maintain his divine composure.
So my question is this, Jesus. Let's suppose I wasn't 100% certain about going to heaven. What must I do to be totally sure that I will? You know, inherit eternal life, as they say.
Have you read the Bible?
Oh, totally. Look, nobody has ever read it quite like me. I am the ultimate Bible reader, okay?
Okay. Well, what does it say about how you should live?
You mean in 2 Corinthians?
No. In the law. In the Old Testament.
Oh, I see. My Bible is brand new, latest edition. I don't read old stuff, only new Bible stuff, like 2 Corinthians.
Jesus responded patiently.
In the part of the Bible called the law, it says you should love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind.
Trump combed his hair and formed his mouth into a perfect circle, as though he was going to say something, but Jesus interrupted.
Do you do that?
Big league, okay? Nobody loves the Lord more than Donald Trump, believe me.
Well, good.
So I'm all set. I have this eternal life thing in the bag. Bigly, I knew it.
Not so fast. There's one more thing you have to do. You must love your neighbor as yourself.
Love my neighbor as myself? As myself? Come on, Jesus. You are pulling my leg, right? I mean, I have some great neighbors, but they're not as great as me, okay? They don't have as much money. Their wives aren't supermodels. They've never had a reality TV show. And nothing in their apartments is plated with actual gold, okay? Some are losers. How can I possibly love them like I love myself?
Jesus began to respond, but Trump interrupted.
You know, I just thought of something. I bet my neighbors actually love me more than they love themselves, okay? And why wouldn't they? So I make it easy for my neighbors to follow this rule about loving your neighbor as yourself.
Once again, Jesus tried to respond, but Trump interrupted.
I do have some great neighbors, though. Great neighbors. Every one of them is a millionaire. Every one. And some are billionaires, but not so rich as me.
Donald, these are not your neighbors.
Yes, they are. They live in the same building. They are my neighbors.
No, that's not what the Bible means when it speaks of our neighbors.
Well then, who is my neighbor according to the Bible? Not those foreigners who work at Gucci's on the first floor, I hope.
Let me explain this by way of a story.
Trump looked at his watch.
Okay, but I hope it's not a long story. I feel a tweet coming on.
Jesus got up and walked to the window and began to speak.
A man was traveling from San Diego to Los Angeles when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him, and went away, leaving him half naked and bleeding to death on the edge of a deserted beach. The pastor of San Diego's largest megachurch happened to be walking along the same beach, and when he saw the man, he made a wide berth and passed by at some distance. In a similar fashion, the mayor of a local town, when he came to the place and saw the unconscious man, passed at some distance. But an undocumented migrant worker, as he walked along the beach, heading to the farm where he picked watermelon for $36 a day, he came across the injured man and took pity on him. He went to him and saw that he was bleeding from knife wounds. So he poured clean water from the bottle in his lunchbox into the man's wounds to clean them. And then he took off his shirt and ripped it into strips to make bandages to stop the bleeding. And he waited. He waited with the man, cradling his head in his lap. And after a time, the injured man regained consciousness, and the migrant worker helped him stand and supported him as they walked together to a nearby building which housed a small shop that rented beach towels. Although he had very little money, the migrant worker gave the owner of the shop $50 in exchange for letting the injured man rest in his facility and use some of the towels for bandages. He also borrowed the shopkeeper's phone and called 911. And as he headed off to the watermelon farm, the migrant worker was happy to see an ambulance pulling up in front of the shop.
Jesus paused and kicked Trump in the shin.
Pay attention, Donald.
Sorry, Jesus, but this is such a long story.
I need to ask you something important about the story I just told you. Which of the three people who encountered the injured man was a neighbor to him?
I have no idea. I don't know where any of these people lived. Probably none of them were neighbors.
But you see, Donald, in the kingdom of God, our neighbors are not just the people who live next door or in the same high-rise building. Our neighbors are the people who come into our lives who need our help. And the injured man on the beach needed help.
Was he vetted?
Vetted?
Yes, vetted. Was he a terrorist, a rapist, a murderer? Was he an American citizen? The pastor and the politician were right to give him a wide berth until he was vetted. You don't put yourself at risk helping people who are not vetted.
How long does vetting take?
Doesn't matter. You take whatever time you need.
But the man was bleeding to death.
Doesn't matter. You vet people before you help them, okay? And if they die, too bad. They should have been more careful. Look, this migrant worker was probably not even an American citizen, okay? And he took this unvetted guy who could have been a terrorist or a murderer and left him with a shopkeeper. Not very neighborly, if you ask me. I certainly wouldn't have brought that injured guy to Trump Tower, believe me.
In the kingdom of God, we help those in need, even when it is uncertain or even dangerous. That is what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. If you were bleeding to death on the beach, you would want help. Would you want a neighbor to help you, even if they did not know who you were? You asked about eternal life, Donald. You must love those in need, all of them, in every part of the planet, in every religion, as you love yourself. Then you will inherit eternal life.
Jesus noticed that Trump was typing something into his phone.
At real Donald Trump, Jesus has crazy ideas about neighbors. Overrated as a thinker, even if he is the Son of God. Sad.
And lastly, we have this. This has kind of been an interesting moment, and also at the same time, a interesting friendship that has spurned through one of our interviews that I did earlier in the year. And I sat down with Christopher Maloney, who was doing a Kickstarter campaign to fund his documentary, In God We Trump. If you're not catching the theme here, we've had a bit of a Trumpy year, just like how I think everyone else has been having a Trump nightmare for 2017. And thankfully, 2017, only a few days left. So keep surviving. Yeah, put those aluminum foil hats on and just wait it out. The end will be near. And I'm not talking about the end with North Korea. No, just the end of the year. But through that, I sat down, I interviewed Christopher before he shot his documentary. And then what was fun, through our conversations after our interview, Chris said, "Hey, do you want to be in the documentary?" And I said, "Well, of course, I would love to be in a documentary. I'm not sure I'm that interesting, but I'll give it a shot." And so Christopher traveled around the country interviewing folks about the Trump effect and simply how evangelicals sold their soul to the Orange Messiah. And through that interview, yes, I, Stuart Deloney, was in a documentary. I know, right? That's a thing. I don't know if it's a big thing, but it's a thing. Maybe it's not a big thing to you guys, but hey, I'd never been in a documentary before, at least on purpose. Usually they're, police mugshots and just me being caught in security camera footage. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and give you that interview, which it was an interesting interview to begin with, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you where to go to catch the trailer for this film that is currently being shopped around the interwebs and actually in several different film festivals coming up. So here is our interview with Christopher Maloney. And if you're interested in hearing more about what Christopher's doing and seeing this trailer that I speak of, you can go to ingodwetrumpfilm.com. You can just go over there and check it out because I am excited to see really what's going to come from this. And on top of this, as I said before, Christopher is really an awesome guy. He's been a pleasure to get to know. And so without further ado for this, here you go. So I'm sitting here today with Christopher Maloney, who has a Kickstarter campaign that is almost to their goal. What Christopher is wanting to do is make a documentary called In God We Trump. So welcome to the show, Christopher.
Hi there.
So Christopher, first of all, tell me kind of what led you to this project.
Right. Well, I've been doing a lot of documentary, nonfiction film work for a while now. That's kind of what I do. And with this most recent presidential election, it was just something that really baffled me that Donald Trump overwhelmingly got what's called the Christian vote, because as a Christian, it was my faith that kept me from even considering supporting him, because from what I could tell, so much of what he does and says is pretty strictly on the platform of hurting other people, which doesn't line up with my faith. So then when he did overwhelmingly get such a huge amount of support from the evangelical community, it made me think, well, I'm obviously missing something, because this is not the faith that I know. So it kind of just, that question kind of gnawed away at me without any satisfying answers, until it just kind of obsessed me to the point where I wanted to make something about it. And the response has been really positive, because a lot of people are wondering that thing as well. So it kind of just, it became a project that way.
So with this project, I know on Kickstarter that you guys are getting super close to your goal. Has the project been completed and you're just seeking expenses for like distribution and travel and all that kind of stuff?
No, we are just starting. So actually, we just did our first interview yesterday, and this is just like a little bit of seed money to get us going, and then it's like the bare minimum of what we need. Like, I'm not paying myself or anything like that. It's the bare minimum of what we need to film the interviews, to put it all together, and then hopefully find a home for it.
So how are you projecting this to look on screen, like for the documentary? I mean, is this mainly interviews? And if so, like, who are you trying to interview?
Right. Well, a lot of it, kind of part of the reason why it started to kind of obsess me so much is because I went back and looked at a lot of footage of high-profile Christians who endorsed Donald Trump on their television programs and their platforms and things like that. High-profile Christians and televangelists who pleaded with their viewers to vote a certain way. That was sort of the initial research I was doing, and it is kind of so unsettling that there's a story to be told just from this cast of characters who all are Christians and all have their own TV shows who kind of banded behind him. So there's a story to be told with footage that's already out there, but people just haven't seen it in the way that we're going to put it together. But then most of it is like a discussion handled through a number of interviews with pastors, with political activists, with people who have written pretty extensively about the subject. Someone from the Washington Post just agreed to be part of it. So it's kind of asking that question and getting that conversation from a lot of different angles, as well as just people who don't really have any official positions. They just voted a certain way, and their faith influenced how they voted. And we're hoping to get kind of both sides of that and come up with some attempt at an answer of this question that baffles a lot of people in the faith community.
And so from your perspective, because I know I'm hearing that you've done a bunch of research, and this is something that we kind of skewer a lot on our show, is the fact that a lot of like high-powered evangelical Christians seem to have sold their souls to hop on the Trump train. Do you feel like this is just an issue of power and money, or is there something else going on?
I wish I knew. I do think it's odd, because I noticed that Donald Trump has a lot in common with the televangelists who support him. Like even on a superficial level, like the kind of outlandish hair and the fake tan, and even like if you look at how his homes are decorated and you look at like the inside of TBN or something, they all have that that kind of taste for like chintzy fake gold. It's very strange to me. I think it's like a personality thing almost, but I think I don't know. It seems like full disclosure, I used to work for a televangelist doing like video editing. And there's just a certain type of personality that goes along with wanting to do that type of work, which is to like put yourself at the forefront of things. I do think that they have that in common, but
it's they kind of all have that snake oil salesman vibe to them, and the bottom line is about money. I went on a tour just more or less as a joke of like one of the TBN studios down in California, and you are not wrong like about things being gold. Like some of the I remember the urinals were gold. I mean, not really gold, but they're gold spray paint or whatever it is. I mean, it is there's a certain, I guess, gaudiness to that, which is weird because at the same time that attracts a lot of people. Because I think some of it's that idea of like I'm a success story, whether it's because like it's Trump, I'm a good businessman, or as televangelist, I'm a success story because God blesses me. And primarily blesses me monetarily.
I think anytime a ministry or a cause becomes about one person, it is a form of idolatry. So like there are these kind of big mega churches. Some of them, when you walk in the foyer, there's a big picture of the pastor instead of like anything having really to do with the faith. It's more about the person whose church it is, and that type of personality they have in common. I used to watch Celebrity Apprentice back, before he was getting involved in politics, and they did an episode that took place inside his apartment, and that was part of like what the contestants talked about was like how just I don't know, just how tasteless the decor was, and almost like it was like a way of saying, look how rich I am.
Yeah. I mean, it all feels like a casino.
Yeah. That's the other thing, too. As someone who's made his fortune in part by being involved in the gambling business, which normally, I grew up in church where gambling was pretty much accepted as a sin. So those same people are the ones who got behind him and put him in office, which, that's one of the things we're kind of wondering why that happened.
Well, it is. And it's one thing I've noticed is that that what Trump did effectively was create this idea of fake news, or that there's a difference between your facts and my facts. Because when I've interacted a lot with folks that you would say are more or less his constituency, even especially the Christians, anytime that you start to bring stuff up to them, it's almost like they put their fingers in their ears and they're just like, la, 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 this is fake news. I cannot hear this. This is fake. It's rigged. And they've created this whole narrative to where there's tons of people that aren't even willing to listen to any outside perspective. And especially when it comes to the Christians, those kind of real conservative right-wing Christians, what they've also done is they've learned to insulate themselves from common culture. So again, it kind of is one of those things where they begin to put up blinders, and they simply just have like tunnel vision to only see what they want to see, or only consume like the news or any kind of media that just backs what they already believe. And I think some of this stems back to the way the church exists now, because the church really anymore, I don't feel like is teaching people critical thought. How to use your faith as a lens to be able to see the outside world. Not that it's good or bad, but you just use your faith as some sort of a lens.
Yeah, they go about it with their support for Donald Trump the same way that they go about their faith, which is to, if they admit that they have doubts or questions, it's like suddenly they're not real Christians because they're ashamed at having doubts or having critical questions, because that to them means their faith is not strong. And that's the same way that they're treating Donald Trump. If they have doubts about him or they have questions about him, it's like they're not fully supporting him anymore. It's the exact same approach. The person we interviewed yesterday, he writes a Christian blog called Freelance Christianity, and he's the chair of the philosophy department at Providence College. But he was talking about how for so many Christians, the idea of like having doubts that cause you to really figure out what you believe about your faith is so frightening to them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to start with that kind of questioning because they're afraid of what they'll find on the other side. He said it's such an important part for him personally of his faith because it helps him to understand more about what he believes and ultimately brings him closer to God. But for some reason, there's a huge fear of that, and it's transferring over to not being willing to question the presidency either.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. I mean, because what ends up happening, I feel like when people's faith become very like cardboard, you end up having whatever, like 10 things that you say, this is what it means to be a Christian, and I must do all of these things. And then pretty much like, once you can say I've hit these things, I'm good. As opposed to the idea that doubt is a component of faith. I mean, the idea that we don't have it figured out, the idea that somehow God is bigger than we can understand, or even simply that when you begin to look at the Bible, a lot of folks would probably end up saying, this is all I need to know about God. And so, if there's this God of the universe, I would hope that there's more to him simply than just that book. Not saying that book is not important, but I feel like there's something larger going on here that that often gets missed by people because, like what you said, they're afraid.
Yeah, I think people who don't question are ultimately really missing out on the richness of what their spiritual life could be.
Now, I was also noticing here on your Kickstarter page too, you have like that it was recently reported that 14% of Christian churchgoers have since left the church because of something related to the election. What do you think is behind that? Is it simply like that, the Christians put so much of their support behind our orange messiah of a president that a bunch of people just got sick of it, or is there something else going on?
Well, I can say personally for me, because I haven't been going to church weekly lately, and it is related to that because the church that I was going to, like, it's very accepting and they were pretty much right on, except everybody who goes there, with the exception of just a very few, are avid Trump supporters. And it was really just a feeling that I didn't belong there anymore. I mean, like, I don't believe that I'm not welcome with God, but I do believe that myself and my convictions are not really welcome in that church. And I'm sure that that's what's behind most of it.
No, I think that's a very good point. And furthermore, like the thing that has really just baffled me a lot with all of this, and it's no surprise. I mean, I know like the religious right has aligned themselves with the Republican Party for the past 50 years. So, all of this isn't like surprising. But what does surprise me is the fact that, you can see people, and I feel like this is what we've lost is, first and foremost, I don't think politics and religion need to mix. I feel like they're two very different planes. Now, my faith can help me inform issues that I care about, but they're not something that needs to be intermingled. Because, I keep going back to the fact that, if you follow the ways of Jesus, the teachings of Jesus, let's just even simply get that. We don't even have to get into denominational stuff. Let's just take Jesus for what he said. And then you begin to look at a lot of the stuff that's Trump is trying to roll out. And I can't reconcile those two things. And, you've got the Jerry Falwell Jr.'s of the world out just saying, well, it's him. I've heard some other stuff. If you're looking for footage, I can probably send you some, where people are saying, if you speak out against the president, that is the Antichrist spirit in you. And
Jim Baker just said that.
Yep. He said that. And I was just like, wait, what are you, what? How these are I feel like this is a really bad math equation that they're trying to put together here. That will never be solved because no, I don't think God cares about that. I mean, I think God cares about the people here. But I think some of this weirdness that happens is that a lot of Christians really believe this is a country that was completely founded on Christian values and everything, that God helped all of this happen. And this is something that, is God ordained. We are like the shining country amongst the rest of the pagan world. And those kind of ideologies, those kind of thoughts, I think really twist everything that we do. Because I'm not going to say God didn't have a hand in stuff happening when our nation was founded, but overall, like you look at our nation's history, like between slavery, the handling of the Indians, in such and so forth, I'm going to go, I don't know that this was necessarily Christian values. I think it's really just the capitalistic values of me that have been a driving force in our country since its inception.
Yeah, it's a common idea that somehow America is exceptional and more favored by God than any other country, but it's not biblical, for one thing.
No,
but
not at all.
I mean, by any means. But also, it's an easy way to write off the rest of the world and to just not concern yourself with the poor, which is what Jesus talked about almost more than anything.
Yeah.
So I think it's a coping mechanism, because once you start to open your heart to the suffering that's going on in the world, it is a real pain to live with. It's a real burden to think about how much compassion is required of us if we claim to be Christians.
Yeah. And
the easy way out is to just say, well, if they accepted the Lord, then they'd be fine. So that's really their problem. And that happens a lot. And I think ultimately it's just a way of kind of giving yourself a free pass.
You're right. And I think that's a problem that what we see in the American church is that faith is something that has become very cheap and easy. You just show up on a Sunday, put some money in the plate, volunteer here and there, and I'm good. Whereas if you really go back to Scripture and look at it, Jesus is calling us to give of ourselves, especially in a way that inconveniences us. In a way, like for me to really be able to sacrifice for somebody else means I am giving up. It could be my time, my money, could be my life. It could be all of these other things. And that's faith that has weight to it. That's faith that has a cost to it. And I think that we've lost a lot of that. I think we've in the American church, we've moved more towards comfort and, just comfort. And like you'd said earlier, like just thinking since I'm a Christian, I'm exceptional. And because I'm God's chosen person, and if you're not part of my tribe, you are an enemy. Which Jesus says a lot about how we're supposed to treat our enemies as well too, which gets forgotten.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it is a tribal thing. It's kind of Jerry Falwell did a very, very good job of aligning conservative thought with the Christian population in this country, and it's really never, its effects are still very much apparent. So whatever he did to convince people of that, he did very well, because it's still around. Like, I've been in churches where it was like the idea of having guns is like somehow a Christian idea.
Yeah.
It's become something very far from Jesus's life and ministry.
Well, even there was, I remember reading a little while back, there's a church in, I believe it's Alabama, because of course, this would probably happen in the South, that they were, I think, trying to get some sort of a permitting so they could have armed security guards in their church.
That passed.
Oh, it passed?
It was a piece of legislation. And it passed.
When I read that, I was just like, I can't even, like, how many like wrongs is that we need to somehow have guns in church? Where is, and I think that it comes down to like back to like what you said earlier about how faith is tough, and then there's doubt with faith, but there's also risk with faith. And I think with that risk, being able to make people feel comfortable because people have guns in the church, that we're now like safe. I feel like that's just ridiculous. And it has no place. It has no place in the church. And the guns and violence tend to go hand in hand. And that's one of those things that I feel like that, it's what God and guns is what I hear from a lot of people down in the South as well, too. Those are like their two things. And
I mean, that has a lot to do with people leaving the church too. I mean, I think if this church has room for guns, then it doesn't have room for me, because it's just not. I don't feel that I'm going to be comfortable in a place that thinks that that's even necessary. That I used to work for a church that the pastor had like bodyguards, and it wasn't even that big of a church. And it was just a way of like feeling important, and they all had their little like security headsets that they talked to each other. I just thought, give me a break. Like, what a waste of resources.
Yeah, but it's also a thing, in like, especially in those types of churches, it's a thing about optics too. It's not just that they feel important; they look important. Because of course someone's going to storm into that church and shoot that guy because he's so important. I don't even know like what the logic is there, but it's an optics thing, and people feed off that. Like, people feed off wanting to be around what is perceived to be successful people, whether it's in the business world, and that's how you get those snake oil salesmen getting their followings that continue to bilk people for money over and over and over again. So this is crazy. So no, I love this. I love this project that you're doing. Do you have like a general like estimate on when stuff's going to be out, or what's your timeline?
Well, I'd like to get it done. I'd like to get it finished while Trump is still in office.
You may have to hurry up.
Yeah, I know. I'm starting to get concerned about that. I'm going to try to get it done by the end of the summer. I'm taking a tour through the South, Kentucky, North Carolina, Alabama, to do a bunch of interviews there. Another trip to Washington, D.C. And then that'll be like everything I do over the summer. So I am hoping to get it done by like the beginning of September, start putting it into festivals and see how it does.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So if people are interested in getting more information about this project or following, the progress, how would you recommend them do that?
They can find me on Facebook. That's pretty much all I talk about on Facebook.
Okay.
So it's Christopher Allen is my name on Facebook.
Okay.
And then, or on Twitter, Maloney's Movies. And then, of course, there's the Kickstarter that people can look up.
Okay, so the Kickstarter. So if you guys go to Kickstarter out there, just look up "In God We Trump," a documentary, and you should be able to find that. Now, how close are you guys right now? I'm looking on the page. You're getting there. You guys are almost there.
Last I checked, we were $226 short, and we have 5 days.
Okay. So when does this project, it stops on, is this Wednesday? Is I think what I'm seeing coming up? Wednesday, May 24th at 9:51 a.m.?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, listeners, if you are interested in this, if you want to be able to get out and help this project, especially because you'll be hearing this, this live on Tuesday. So make sure to go to Kickstarter if you are interested to get more information and potentially donate if you're interested in this. So Christopher, I am excited. I'm excited to see what comes of this. And I appreciate your time, and I wish you the best as you go on your summer road trip.
Thank you very much.
Well, that about wraps it up for our recap show from 2017. The next time we'll catch you, it will be 2018, a year filled with hope, simply because it's not 2017. Oh man. I love the hope of a year, especially at the beginning, when we can say, can't be as bad as last year. And that's what I'm going to stick to until we kind of probably dig our way into 2018 and Well, this show is called Snarky Faith, so one way or another, you'll get me being snarky, whether it's snarky hopeful or snarky pessimistic. Womp womp. But I want to go ahead and just say a great big thank you to all of our guests, to all of our listeners who've been part of our show for this past year. As we kind of get to the end of this broadcast, just a reminder that you can catch this show and past shows on our website by podcast, www.snarkyfaith.com. You can also find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. And again, if you're wanting to be able to check out Christopher Maloney's film, look up In God We Trump film.com and it'll be there. The trailer will be there waiting for you. And as a reminder, you can reach out to us here at Snarky Faith. It's simply questions@snarkyfaith.com. And Christopher has told me if we want to get together a group of folks here in the local area to actually have a preview party, I actually have my hands on the documentary. If people want to be able to do that, come together, give me a shout out. Tell me if you want to do this. I'd love to have you guys a part of that if you want to. But I will tell you, have a blessed end to 2017. Grace and peace be with you. That's all the time I have got this hour, and I will catch you guys in the new year. I'm out of here. See ya.
WCOM is listener-supported community radio, and Snarky Faith is only possible through our sponsors. Lumen, a spiritual community of seekers, sojourners, question-askers, doubters, and skeptics, is a collective of fellow travelers that embrace the truth that all of life is sacred, hope is real, and tomorrow can be a better day than today. All are welcome. You can find more information at www.lumencommunities.com.
God bless the United States. Thank you very much. United States.